Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome on behalf of CoHSAT, Oxfordshire's Coalition for Healthy Streets and Active Transport. We are 18 organisations with a combined membership of over 4,000 people. We're here today with all of you because of the problems in Oxford's transport system and the diverse range of people and needs that it must serve. Our aim for this evening is to broaden the discussion out from the formal consultation process with its technical drawings and away from the hurly-burly of social media, and to create a place where the public can have a sensible discussion on an important topic that is vital to all of our futures in many ways. With that, we've got we've got some leaflets at the back from different organisations. Those are not particularly endorsed by CoHSAT, and some people have taken the opportunity to hand some out. Those are not necessarily CoHSAT leaflets. But with that, we're on with the event, and I'm delighted to hand you over to our chair for the evening, Oxford City Council's Cabinet Member for Inclusive Communities and Culture, Councillor Shaista Aziz.
Hi, good evening everyone. I'm just standing over here because I've got a few pieces of paper, so just easier to stand here. First of all, thank you to everyone for being here. It's really important that we are holding this transparent, open discussion on this very crucial issue. Obviously, we all know that in the past few days we've had an absolutely extraordinary situation of record temperatures in our country, in our city. 40 plus degrees here in this country, which is quite staggering. Excuse me, can I just please ask for comments to be kept to yourself for now, please? Thank you. There will be an opportunity. There will be an opportunity to speak. So now is not the time, but thank you very much. So the context, we all understand it because we are living through it. Record-breaking temperatures. We've seen more than 100 wildfires, not just in London, but across the country. Many of them are not being reported on, primarily because there's so many of them that, the media is only focusing on the main ones. We've seen houses in the suburbs of London that have gone up in smoke. And none of this is unexpected, as we know. Scientists have been warning for many, many, many decades of what is happening now, and they have not been listened to. So I'm just going to make it very clear. That this event is an event where we are going to respectfully listen to each other and to the participants who have made time to come here. This is not an event where people are going to be shouted down, heckled or silenced. So what I would like you to do, sir, is please show some respect. And if you're unwilling to do so, then I would like to invite you to leave. So I'll give you a minute to decide which option you'd like to take. Thank you very much. It is rather unfortunate that you've decided to monopolise our time in this way. So I'm going to set my clock for a minute, and if you could kindly decide what you plan to do. Either you can leave, or if you're going to stay, then I invite you to please show some respect to everybody in this room, and I ask you to understand that you will not be allowed to continue in the way that you've chosen to continue. So I'll give you a minute to decide. Okay, so I take it you've decided to stay, is that correct? I do not want you to speak. There will be an opportunity for you to speak. So now you've decided to stay in the room, and you as well, madam. And so this means that you've agreed to stay in this room, to listen to the panel, to listen to the event, and when the time comes for you to speak, you will be given an opportunity to do so. We do not want you to interrupt. So as long as you agree with that, then I think we can continue. Thank you very much. So as I was saying, we've got record-breaking temperatures. We are seeing the climate emergency unfolding before our very eyes. We've seen this going on across Europe, in countries such as Spain, Greece, and elsewhere. Also, today, The Guardian published research from the University of Manchester, which shows people of colour are 4 times more likely to live in areas at high risk from heat waves in the UK. And as I said, this is research from the University of Manchester. They're saying that overall, almost 6 million people were found to live in neighbourhoods at risk from high temperatures, with black and brown people disproportionately represented. The average proportion of people of colour in high-risk neighbourhoods was 28%, compared with a national average of 9.5%. Now, I'd purposefully raise this here because the city of Oxford is one of the most diverse cities in the United Kingdom. We have a 28% population born outside of the UK. One of the challenges, and there are many challenges around the issues that we're here to discuss this evening, is how do we, the collective, we ensure that the most marginalised people who are on the front line of this crisis, be it here in our city, in the UK, in Europe, or indeed around the world, their realities are being listened to and their voices are being heard. And we need to ensure that the spaces that we're creating to discuss and debate solutions are inclusive spaces for everyone, and where we understand that people who are the most marginalised are the ones who are on the front line. And we also understand that, for example, the community of people who have disabilities, which can range from a number of things, as we know, are being listened to specifically on this issue around transport and green policy. So we need to find ways to bring people and communities together. We need to find ways where we're not shouting and screaming at each other, where we're listening. And there are many uncomfortable truths around the discussion that we're here to have today, and indeed the work that we need to do. But the only way we can move forward is if we start showing more respect to each other and understanding that we may share a city, but we don't necessarily all share the same realities. And I'll just stop by saying that over the past 18 months, a record temperature of 52 degrees was recorded in Pakistan. Now, this is where my family are from. This is in a part of Pakistan called Sindh, which is an agricultural heartland. It's a place that has been subjected to record amounts of flooding. Some of the worst flooding in the history of the world has also been recorded in this area of Pakistan. I'm a former aid worker. I've spent more than 20 years working in international contexts. I worked in Sindh approximately 10 years ago, and I can tell you that the temperatures were absolutely unbearable then. But in the last 10 years, these temperatures just keep going up, up, and up. And most of the people who live there are either bonded labourers or they are people who work in agriculture. These are not rich people. These people have nowhere to go. We need to connect these realities with the realities of the diaspora communities here in our city. We also need to connect these realities to people fleeing for their lives, refugees, migrants. The number of people who are in peril will only increase. So when we are doing our thinking about what we need to do here in Oxford, we need to act local and think global. All of these issues are intersected and interconnected. And I will just reiterate one more time that the purpose of us being here this evening is to model the behaviours that we want to see. We need to create space and room for people to be listened to and heard, whether we agree with them or not, okay? And if we can do that, then I'm very, very sure that we can move things forward in the way that we need to. So I will just read out some basic housekeeping rules. The toilets are through the side door, the men's toilets are on the ground floor, the women's toilets are upstairs. And I've been told that the fire exits are clearly marked, so everybody knows where the fire exits are. And before I pass the microphone over to Councillor Andrew Gant, I will just for the last time reiterate the point, which is if you have a question, there will be a Q&A section. And what we call on everyone here to do, please, is make sure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off, and to, again, engage in the purpose of this event in a respectful manner. Shouting and heckling people will not be accepted, and I will not make any apologies for that. We are here to have a debate and a discussion and to work together to move things forward. So without further ado, I would like to invite Councillor Andrew Gant to come and give your address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shyster. Do I need to use this microphone and that one? Okay. That makes life easier. Just like to echo Shyster's thanks to everybody for coming along this evening. I hope you can hear me okay, please. No?
Use that one, Andrew.
I think you just need to get closer to the mic.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're okay with that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good. Standing in this sacred edifice makes me think that I might forget what I'm doing and revert to another aspect of my working life by mistake. So if I start talking about hymns, just tell me to shut up. Although you can all buy my book in Waterstones. Anyway, it's great to be with you this evening to talk about transport planning in Oxford and Oxfordshire. I've been asked just to give a brief overview of the content of what we're calling, for the moment, the core schemes. The names do tend to change and evolve, which I'll do with the help of the presentation that Jamie will run for us. It does come with a proviso, please, which is that there are obviously a lot of detailed discussions about how these plans might evolve, and for reasons you'll all understand, it's not up to me as a councillor or a cabinet member to preempt what might or might not be in any particular consultation, still less what might come out the other end of that consultation, or indeed when any consultation might be, before those things have been formally decided and announced. And you'll understand the reasons for that. So if any of you ask me a question and I just start talking about the weather, that will be why. So, transport challenges in Oxfordshire. Shyster has very eloquently reminded us of one of the key drivers behind transport planning and transport policy, which is the need to do our bit to address climate change. That is at the heart of the priorities of the County Council. Congestion is a problem in many cities. It affects people's daily lives. It affects the ability of employers to recruit. It affects the ability of our public transport providers to deliver a service which we all need. There is a large amount of development coming to our city, which we all know about. There's been a great deal already, and there's going to be a great deal more. Don't underestimate the scale of change that our city is going to see, and that gives us both the necessity, but also the opportunity to plan in advance how those residents and those workers are going to get around our city. And it is key to do that first and not to try and think about it afterwards. Equality and health. Transport has a key role to play in both of those things, which again, as Shyster has reminded us, are things which Oxford, as a leading city and a university city, does not do as well as we should on anything like. And finally, on this first slide, again, attractive, sustainable travel. Well, they're easy things to say, but what that means is, providing ways for people to get around which are pleasant, easy to use, healthy, and good for you. Thank you, Jamie. This just puts a little bit more flesh on those particular points there. Partnership working is, of course, absolutely key. Working with other councils, with our providers of public transport, with schools, with our universities, a whole range of partners. Thank you. I think you've skipped two there, haven't you, James? Oh, okay, there we go. Some of the elements of the County Council's policy making and plans are referred to there. At the bottom there, we're talking about the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan, which was adopted by Council recently. It's a very big document. Do have a look at it if you have time. It's a good document. And at the bottom there refers to the Bus Service Improvement Plan, which is a specific piece of government initiative, piece of government funding aimed obviously at improving buses, as the name would suggest. These are some targets that the Council has set itself. They are ambitious. They are to do with climate, they are to do with carbon emissions, and they are to do with setting ourselves targets for reducing car journeys. By 2040, by 2030, to replace or remove 1 out of every 4 current car trips. By 2040, 1 out of every 3. That is a substantial and ambitious target that we've set ourselves. And this just moves on to talk a little bit about the document that I've already mentioned, the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan. This is the overarching document which will form the basis of a series of further area strategies. And the first one of those to come forward, as it says at the bottom there, the Central Oxfordshire Transport Strategy, which, as its name suggests, broadens out the schemes that we'll be talking about for Oxford itself to include the surrounding area as well. And here are the key elements that underpin that strategy. And perhaps just to pick out one, the one at the bottom there is a hierarchy of users, and that is now enshrined in county council policy. And it puts active travel at the top of the hierarchy. It is now policy that it will be easier for you to walk and cycle, where possible, obviously, and where there is a conflict between prioritising that and prioritising the motor vehicle, that active travel will be prioritised. So, the core schemes, this is all familiar stuff because we've been talking about these schemes for a long time, as you know, but they have 3 elements, and the elements are traffic filters. Those are, as the name suggests, camera-controlled points on a road where the camera is used to allow certain vehicles to pass and other vehicles not to pass. And of course, the key there is in the detail, who can pass, and when and under what circumstances. Not a new idea. We've had one in the High Street for a long time. There are others in Oxford and, of course, elsewhere. The second element, workplace parking levy. This is an idea that's been used successfully elsewhere, most notably in Nottingham. And this is a tool to try and encourage behaviour change. And it's important to stress that a lot of this policy is about trying to change people's behaviours. Do you really need, to drive to work? Is that in fact in your best interests? If you do, then it is still possible to do that. That also has the great benefit that it raises funds which are then used to deliver further improvements to traffic model, management and to public realm. And then the third element there is the zero emission zone, which has been introduced on a very small footprint, including where we are now already, and the proposal is to roll that out over a wider area. So those 3 schemes together form what we're calling the core schemes. And there is a map of, where the schemes might apply. The dots there are the possible, I'm sort of caveating all this as much as I can, locations of the traffic filters, the green area, the expanded ZEZ, and the blue area, potentially, possibly, the area in which the workplace parking levy might apply. None of that is fixed. There will be a proposal that goes out for consultation, and then you will, of course, have an opportunity to respond to that consultation. The bus service improvement plan there was a big success, something I'm very proud of on behalf of the County Council. We applied to government. Many authorities did not receive anything. We were successful, didn't get everything we asked for. That's the way of these things. But it didn't enable us to deliver some very specific named benefits to bus services, including, for example, £1 flat fares within the city for 18 and under and rationalising youth fares throughout the county to safeguard a couple of named rural routes and some other really good benefits. So I'm really pleased about that. Of course, it would be fantastic to go a lot further than that, and I hope that we will be able to, but that's a great start. Another policy here, Zebra, clearly a project whose name was chosen because it made a snappy acronym. We do love an acronym in local government. The Zero Emission Bus Regional Area, I think that's right, isn't it? Yes. Because, of course, regional area is, of course, a tautology just put in to spell the word zebra, but there you go. And again, a really great policy. Over 150 brand new electric buses funded jointly by a bid to government, by the county council and by the bus companies themselves. And here we just elucidate some of the benefits of the transport plans. Some of the benefits that will accrue will be delivered to residents of Oxford and Oxfordshire. I think those are self-explanatory. And next steps. There will be a consultation on the core schemes. We don't know exactly when yet. We don't know exactly what will be in it. But I'm absolutely certain that it will generate a great deal of public interest because traffic schemes often do. So I'll just wrap up, if I may, by just making a couple of observations. One is that, as I think has been implied by this presentation, one of the features of traffic planning is that in practice it is a combination, a mesh, an organism of lots and lots of different schemes which all exist in different ways but all overlap with each other. For example, the Zebra bid requires the bus companies to demonstrate to government a 10% improvement in efficiency. The County Council's mechanism for delivering that is the core schemes. That has to be done by a particular date in order to secure the funding. So those two schemes are intimately linked together, and there are many other synergies between schemes. They don't necessarily come at us in the order that we would necessarily choose. As a county council, some of these schemes are ones which have been talked about for a very long time, and we've inherited from the previous administration, which is great. I paid tribute to my predecessors who worked hard on these schemes, and we are taking forward the elements of them that we support and delivering new ones as well. But the sequencing of those is not necessarily always under your control. A lot of these schemes are funded with a particular grant from government, which comes with particular rules about how it has to be spent, when it has to be spent. The schemes delivered through the growth deal, for example, are a good example of that. But it all fits together, and they all have to be made to work together, and it has to be understood what you can do in order to make those fit together. So, for example, when we were discussing in the County Council just a week ago a proposal from the opposition to make park and rides free, the proposer of the motion, when challenged by me about how he would pay for this, said he would do it by cancelling the installation of low traffic neighbourhoods. Well, no, you can't, because under the deal which he himself agreed with government, those funds were applied for specifically to deliver that particular outcome. And you can't just raid one pot to fund another one, and certainly not capital to replace revenue. So it's important to understand that you have a sort of universe of schemes. It's an organism that all have to fit together and be made to work together. And then the final point that I think I would make is that all of this adds up to an overall vision. Those of us who are in this business spend a lot of our time talking about the detail, talking about a particular scheme, a particular budget. But at the end, there is a vision of a better Oxford a better Oxfordshire, a healthier place to live and to work, an easier place to get around, and a place that works better for everybody who lives and works here. And that is what we are committed to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, we're going to have Jamie, who's just going to provide us with a bit of information about how the Q&A questions will be taken, and then we're going to get straight into the panel. So, Jamie, just hand it over to you.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's a little bit of an experiment, I suppose, but we're keen to try and have the most popular questions asked, and also all the people who are watching on live stream can also have a chance to ask questions. So we're using this method called AHA Slides, and there'll be two ways to do this. One is through your smartphone, and if you don't have a smartphone, you'll be able to ask questions with a sticky note, and I'll come to that in a minute. So if you want to just sort of log on, you see the Wi-Fi addresses there at the bottom. Password trees will grow all lowercase if you need it. But what you need to do is, people are now passing around, I hope, some leaflets like this. Can people pass around leaflets? So you can just scan the QR code on that leaflet and it'll take you straight there. Otherwise, you just go to that website address and you'll see, and what you'll be able to do then is you'll be able to ask a question, but also you'll see all the other questions that have been asked, and you'll be able to vote up those questions as well. So what's happened is that in the panel discussion that follows, Shaista will bring in some of the more popular questions and make sure they get asked from the audience as well.
What about those of us who don't have smartphones?
Well, I'm just coming to that. So for those of you who don't have a smartphone, you do try and share with the person next to you, which is also fine to do, but also raise your hand and a steward will bring you a sticky note and a pen. And then you can write your question on the sticky note and the pen. And you then hand it, so everyone who's got their hands up, if they could have a sticky note and a pen, please. Then if you hand that back to the steward, then they will take it over to Kerry or Alison on either side, who will type that in for you.
It's still in private mode.
This
presentation is in private mode.
So it's in private mode. Scott, can you change the setting? It's still in a private mode. So, yeah, I mean, is anyone else having trouble asking questions on the AHA slides? So we'll sort that out and hopefully get that through. But in the meantime, do raise your hand for a sticky note. And if sticky notes are all going round at a rate of knots, please just ask questions. And if you get too frustrated with AHA slides, just do the sticky note. Thank you. And I have, yes.
Okay, thank you everyone. So we understand that there are some challenges at the moment with submitting your questions online. There is a team of people over there who are working on fixing that, and pens and post-it notes are being handed out. So please bear with us and we will collect your questions. Okay, so without further ado, we are now going to get on with the reason why we're here, which is to listen to this fantastic panel that we have here. Each of them are specialists on this issue, and they've all given up their time to be here this evening to share their expertise with us. And if I could just ask those of you who are trying to get your questions taken down by the volunteers, if you could just please try not to speak too loudly so we can hear the panel.
Should now be working.
Okay, I've just been told that the online system is now working, which is great that the computer now says yes. How good is that? Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we will get going with some questions.
Hello, my name is Tim Schwanen. I'm Professor of Transport Geography at the University of Oxford, and I lead the Transport Studies Unit in the university, which is the only institute within the university that is specifically devoted to the study of transport. I'm a social scientist by training, and I am particularly interested in questions of behavior change, of the political processes around the policy process and the politics of that. And I've been studying the changes in Oxford's transport system for almost 10 years now. So I think I know a thing or two about how things go and how they run and how they sometimes don't work in this city.
Thanks. So I'm Louise Upton. I'm a city councillor and I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport and Health, which may not be an obvious combination until you think about how much your transport choices affect your health and the health of everybody around you. Sometime last year I went to a webinar, a seminar given by Active Oxfordshire, and it started with a video which was really entitled, "What Would You Do with 7 More Years of Life?" And it featured lots of school children who'd been asked this question. And they came up with things like, oh, I'd invent a cure for nosebleeds, or I'd start a guinea pig breeding farm, or whatever. Anyway, the point was that the premise of the question was that children born today are going to die 7 years younger than their parents. And a huge driver of that is physical inactivity. Another one is air pollution. So for me, I think, if we could get people to walk to the bus stop, cycle to work, if they can, every day, then we would be building into people's everyday lives just that bit of physical activity that they need to make them healthier, to give them longer, healthier lives. So that's why I think transport and health is quite an obvious combination. So I think in the audience today we've probably got quite a lot of people who have a firm view one way or another. I think hopefully there's also some people who aren't quite sure about these measures. So from you, I really want to hear what would make these measures work for you. Because we're looking, Andrew and I at the moment, we're looking at the package of mitigation measures to go in with these. So let us know what would make them work for you. And I don't underestimate the huge amount of change that this is going to be for some people. And so I think we really have to think about how we're going to make it easier for people, how we're going to help them make these changes in their lives. And I just want to do one quick plug for one of our fellow councillors who, actually, I think she is here. She's a Green councillor, so that's one of the party that's not up here. But she's done this fantastic scheme where she's managed to get 3 electric bikes for dinner ladies. And it apparently has been absolutely transformational for them. They're now able to cycle into work when they used to spend their time sitting in traffic jams. So these are the kind of measures we need to be looking at bringing in as well. And just if you don't think we should be doing any of these measures, I'd just like to ask you, what would you do then to give an extra 7 years of life back to the children being born today? Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. I'm Luke Marion, and I'm the Managing Director of Oxford Bus Company Thames Travel City Sightseeing. Many of you in the audience will remember my predecessor, Phil, and like Tim, I've been in Oxford for about 10 years, and most of those years as the sidekick to Phil. So Phil's now off doing his new thing at the group with our group company, and I'm filling his shoes at the moment while he's away. I also know a few faces in the audience in one of my other roles, which is as Treasurer of Low Carbon Hub, which I've done since 2015. So again, I guess like Tim, I've had a lot of experience of doing things in Oxford for some time. Got a good understanding of how the transport network works or doesn't work for bus users. And my role really is to try and provide a voice for bus users who quite often don't have the voice that they need to ensure that when we are looking at transport schemes, we're thinking about things that benefit bus users and make their lives easier and better, because they're the people that are already making some of the right choices.
You've heard enough from me, but just to confirm, I'm Andrew Gant. I'm a member of the City Council and the County Council, and I've lived in Oxford for 23 years.
Brilliant. So I've moved over here just to save time with the microphone. So we're going to start the Q&A, and just rest assured the questions that have been submitted online are popping up on my screen, and I do have them. So Tim, we're going to start with you, and I'm going to be very cheeky because if you hadn't noticed, I'm a bit cheeky. I'm going to ask you 2 questions which kind of connects. The first one is, why is it necessary to make change and implement schemes? And another question that is very popular online is, what do you say to people who believe they need, inverted commas, a car? So if we start off with you, Tim. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. On the first question on why we need these schemes, I think we've heard a lot already. There's the issue of congestion, there's the issue of air pollution, there's the issue of carbon emissions, there are the issues about health inactivity, and there are all kinds of issues around social inequality. People who are excluded from the caste system suffer in many ways. They are disadvantaged in quite a few ways, also in Oxford. Electrification of vehicles is being promoted as a way of changing some of these issues, but what electrification only does really well is improve the air quality situation. If you're lucky, if your energy mix is the right one, it will also help you to reduce carbon emissions. But it doesn't solve congestion. It won't solve questions about health that relate to inactivity. It won't address questions around the unfair, the uneven distribution of social opportunities and life opportunities in the city. Often in policy, we put the emphasis on choice. We need to give people the choice to behave differently. And that's wonderful. But it's also quite clear from the work that people like my colleagues in the transport studies have been doing, that is not enough to create the scale of change that we need. So we can't only do it with the carrots, we also need sticks. And it's the combination of the two that we need. And there are many benefits to the schemes that are being promoted, that are being advocated and introduced. And I think together as a package, they will help to address some of the issues. Transport is a domain that is incredibly difficult to change. We have a very poor track record in improving transport issues. And it's only by combining measures into what we call packages or mixes of instruments that you have a chance of reducing some of these. That's what this plan is trying to do, and that's why I think we need to not focus on the individual instruments, the individual interventions. We need to look at the whole package. And for me, the workplace levy is a workplace parking levy, I should say, is a very important aspect in that, because it will give local authorities more financial resource to really implement the vision that Andrew was talking about. Because he kind of made the point about the dependence on national government. And this is a real problem in the UK. There are very few European countries where the finance of transport policy is as centralized as the UK. You basically, as a local authority, have to go and beg with national government to get money. And the money at national level hasn't become more, there is not more money. In fact, it has gone down very significantly, while cities are expected to do more. This workplace levy is very important, and there are examples in the UK where it has worked. Nottingham is the case that we always refer to, and the workplace levy there has had very important aspect. It has directly reduced car use, but it has also brought in money that has allowed the council to do additional policies. And it has meant that Nottingham has been able to make far stronger cases to national government to get funding for its projects. So there are many what we call indirect benefits of this workplace parking levy. And I think Oxford really needs this to tackle the issues that it addresses. Of course, it needs to be implemented in a way that is fair and that takes into account that not all the costs end up with the individual car users, but it's really also something that the employers make a very significant contribution to. But those are details that will be worked out in the next steps going forward.
Thank you. So Tim, the next question is for you. Sorry, apologies, let me start again. Luke, the next question is for you. Does the Oxford Bus Company support the proposed changes? And if not, then what would you suggest?
No, we absolutely support the proposed changes, Shasta. Yes, we've been working very closely with the council on things like the zebra bid and the bus service improvement plan. So a lot of work from our side went into that to try and win that funding. And like Andrew, I'm really pleased that we did win some of that funding. And we do have a problem in Oxford as bus operators because the bus productivity really has reached record lows. In recent years, we've been on a long-term path of decline in terms of our journey speeds. And when that happens, basically our product becomes less attractive. It's harder to convince people to make that behavioural change to use the buses. Less people then use the buses, and then the ones that do need to pay more to use the buses. And so on, we go into a vicious cycle. When you add into the fact that we're not getting the funding from government that we used to do, local authority budgets are not what they used to be, we found ourselves pushing water uphill, really trying to keep things where they were and not improving to the level we want to. So really we see ourselves at a bit of a crossroads at the moment. These schemes are really, really exciting. We can get investment for new vehicles, electric vehicles. We can make a big contribution to decarbonisation and sorting out the climate, improving all those health outcomes that Louise spoke about. And we can improve the quality of the vehicles and the network for bus users, make journeys faster. We can have new services that go to different places. We can enhance the services we've already got, or we can kind of carry on trying to push water uphill like we've been doing for the last 10 years and go down a different path, which is going to be a lot more negative and a lot harder for us to keep the lights on. So, for us, if we're not doing this, I would kind of ask, what are we going to be doing? Because pushing water uphill for the next decade is not really something I'm too keen to be doing, and it certainly isn't going to allow us to achieve the aims that we all want to do and that we need to do, as the other speakers have mentioned. So yes, no, we are very supportive of the plans.
Thank you very much. Andrew, I've got two questions I'm going to pose to you. The first one is, how are you looking at the traffic associated with the school run, in particular related to private school traffic in North Oxford? Obviously, I know North Oxford is your patch, that's why I'm coming to you on that one. Yeah. And the next question is, why only a so-called zero emission zone for Oxford? Why not a car-free city centre?
Schools, yep. School streets is in my portfolio. Again, a policy that I'm, really delighted about. And there have been a number of schools that have had really fantastic results, and some of the lead volunteers are here tonight in delivering behaviour change. What could be nicer than walking your children to school? That's what it's all about, or cycling with them. And we are now taking steps to make those schools that had successful volunteer programmes more permanent, inviting applications from other schools that want to take part. So if you have any contacts and they want to do it, let me know. Private schools, yep, absolutely. Had a meeting about it this afternoon. I don't want to sort of set any hairs running, but, clearly anybody who has spent any time anywhere near any roads in Oxford knows that when the schools are out, the traffic goes down, and that disproportionately private schools contribute more for reasons we can all understand, because their catchment tends to be wider. And yeah, absolutely, we are taking steps to address that. I'm not going to go any further than that at the moment, but look out for that. And what was the second part of the question?
Okay, the second question, I'm just going to scroll down, let's see where it is. So it's about the ZEs, the zero emission zone. Why is it just to a particular part of the city? Why not wider?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a policy that's been around for ages. I've held this cabinet portfolio for about, 7 weeks now. Seems a lot longer sometimes. But, I remember first talking about this at City Council scrutiny meetings in 2015, and the whole issue of exactly how big it can be and how long it takes to do all the necessary consultation, all that kind of thing, is just complicated, and the technology that's needed to roll it out. But yeah, I mean, there are people who've said exactly that. If you're going to use cameras, why not basically have a charging zone like the London congestion charge zone, which covers the whole city? Now, actually, we don't have the legal powers to do that. London is arranged differently in terms of its legality. The ZEZ policy, and it's great to see that the City Council committed fully to that in its City Centre Action Plan adopted just a couple of days ago, is where we've got to with that. But it's entirely possible that there may be a way of evolving that. Pedestrianising the city centre, yep, Broad Street is about to happen. Absolutely thrilled, really delighted that the County Council is bringing that forward, and huge credit to my predecessor in this role, my colleague. We've been using it as a car park. Who thought that was a good idea?
Okay, apologies for those of you at the back who haven't been able to hear me. I'll try and speak clearer into the microphone. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to bundle these two questions together again, and Tim will go with you first, and then Louise, and then work down the panel. So I already did reference this point in the introduction, but I think it's very important that the panel ask this question. So the question here is, this room does not reflect the ethnic background of Oxford and especially East Oxford. How will you ensure marginalised communities are listened to? There is already a lot of anger in the community. And then there is another question, which I'm just going to find. Here it is. Transport policy debates often come down to fairness. What is most important to ensure fairness in changing the transport system, both in how we make decisions and what we decide? So I really would like the panel to focus on this issue around racial diversity in our communities and our city, because this is a very critical issue. So if I could really ask you to focus on that and then also talk about the wider issues around fairness. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm very, very glad that these issues are being raised because they are very important. And I think it's probably fair to say that in the participatory processes in Oxford around transport policy, many voices have not been heard to the extent that they should. And actually, some of the ethnic minorities in East Oxford are a very good example of that situation. And we know that in some of these communities, there is a attachment to driving a car that we don't see as much in other groups. And that is for a range of different reasons that have to do with the status that driving and owning a vehicle has. In terms of what to do is to really listen and make sure that the processes for participation really are given the time that they need. You can't rush these things. And I think what we've seen after the pandemic with the low traffic neighborhoods consultation processes, those have been conducted too fast. I think there's a lot of learning about how things can be improved going forward in that regard. And I think that will mean also thinking about ways where you can reach these groups, where you can engage meaningfully with these groups. And that means that we will have to experiment more with different ways of doing that than we do it at the moment. And you can't, for instance, only rely on online techniques for that, because you will see that what we call digital divides cut through these communities more strongly than in other places. So there are many people who are effectively not able to participate in those kinds of techniques. So I think that's really important. There's a lot of expertise in the universities, not only in our university, also in Oxford Brookes, and I think there is really an opportunity for the city and the institutions of learning to come together and think about how some of these processes can be reconfigured.
Thank you. Before we come to you, Louise, can I just ask the organisers if anyone's collected the post-it notes, if you can hand them to me as well, because I only have the questions here online. So in the interest of being fair, I would like... You put them on there? Okay, that's fine. Just double checking. Thank you. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks. Yes, so I think we did miss an opportunity, or an opportunity was missed in East Oxford before the LTNs went in. There was definitely a problem where, for example, nobody went and talked to the mosques beforehand, because they have been presented with problems because people come to the mosques from various different parts of the city, and it has made a real impact on them, some of the low traffic neighbourhoods. So there is something to learn. The City Council is pretty good at engaging with its communities. The hubs that sprang up through the pandemic that we created around different parts of the city in order to engage with communities who went and have tapped into who is isolated, who needs help getting shopping, who needs help getting medicine. So I think we have a lot more roots in now, the City Council particularly, into our different communities, and we must really use those. So in the consultation period that will be coming up on these the core transport schemes, we have got to be very proactive at going out and consulting with people. I know the county have already from February onwards have had something like 70 meetings with different stakeholder groups. So they're trying. So I think we will get better at that. Was there another part of the question? I think that's good. Thanks.
Who's next, Josh? Is it me?
Yeah, just going to continue with the same question.
Right, on equality. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
equalities,
I guess we have a similar view, really, that there are some communities that are underrepresented in terms of using our services. So we do recognise exactly what Tim and Louise have said about that. That there are a number of reasons why people don't use our services, and there are also some types of employees that our services don't work for. People who work at the NHS, for example, in the hospitals at the moment. Our services don't really offer a great alternative to them compared to driving because of the way workplace parking and things like that work. So there are a number of areas where our services could be more appealing to different groups, and obviously keen to make sure that we work to do that. And some of that is going to be around changing the types of services we offer. If we are successful with these schemes coming in, we've committed that we're going to look to reinvest all the resources we might save from faster journey times into improving services. And Stagecoach have committed that as well. So the idea is, if we do need services like Pick Me Up that we had here before, maybe more orbital buses, buses to meet needs that aren't currently met by the network at the moment, that maybe one of the reasons we might be excluding certain groups, then we are looking at doing that and working with the county on what those best interventions might be.
Yeah, thanks, Shasta. So, the question was about engaging with communities who have not been engaged sufficiently, and I think we would all recognise that is the case. I think from where I'm standing, the answer is talk to people and listen to what they say, and I'm doing my best to do that. The issue around consultation, as Louise has implied there, is one that public bodies do wrestle with a lot. It is hard, actually, and we have to do it a lot. A lot of things involve statutory consultations, and we spend a lot of time talking about, well, how do you avoid just talking to the people that you already talk to? Particularly how do you reach young people, who are, after all, the people who are going to be living in this city that we're designing now. Because let's face it, they've got more interesting things to do than fill in an online consultation, or at least. But it's, talk to people, meet people, listen to what they say, and perhaps I would just put as a proviso with that it does therefore require people to engage with that process in a consensual and collaborative and courteous way. And, not everybody does that. I mean, whatever, that's our job.
Thank you. Luke, a question for you. Do you agree that buses in Oxford are, for many people, not affordable? And if so, what can be done about that?
Right, well, I'm obviously going to not agree to that statement in full. Obviously, I do believe buses to be very good value, but I also recognise we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and a lot of people are finding things quite hard just now. We saw the news this morning, didn't we, that inflation was 9.4%, the highest for 40 years. So absolutely, there are areas where maybe our bus fares aren't as good value as they could be. The bus fares, really, like I said earlier, are an output of how much it costs to run the network and how many people use the network. So if the network doesn't run very quickly and it isn't very attractive and therefore lots of people don't use it, then the people that do use it are going to end up paying more for it. So that isn't great. Like Andrew said, we have managed to get some funding to try and make buses cheaper for certain groups. There is going to be a £1 flat fare for under 18s across the city. That's something we offer now, but it isn't offered by all operators. And the process to get that is a little bit convoluted at the moment. So trying to remove some of those barriers. We're also trying to work with some of the NHS employers to try and make buses cheaper for them. And I think they've got some quite interesting schemes they're looking to bring forward there as well. But absolutely, the pandemic has changed people's demand patterns, and some of the tickets that maybe we used to offer aren't as great value as they used to be. So we've had to look at making some changes there too. You may have seen last week that the Park and Ride, for example, we've announced with the councils that we're going to be doing a change there to make the Park and Rides cheaper and easier for people to use and more competitive with driving into the city and parking in the car parks there. So there's always more we can be doing to look at where our products aren't appealing, where we're not getting the pricing right, and try and make changes to that. Having said that, we do need to run the network and cover the costs of running it. And obviously we've had COVID the last couple of years. COVID's had a massive, massive financial impact on the business. The first year of the pandemic, we had over 20 million of government support, and we achieved a break-even result of that. The year that we just ended, we had 7 million of government support, and again achieved a break-even result with that. So we're currently not charging enough that we need to the people who are using the network for the cost of running the network, because government emergency funding has been bailing us out. And that isn't something that we're going to be able to do ongoing forever. The funding ends at the end of September. Obviously, we do need to get back to a position where the network can fund itself and we can invest in improvements. So, yeah, that's probably my view on that one.
Thank you. Tim, there's several questions being asked about behaviour change. The questions are being asked in different ways. So I was wondering if you could kindly just take a few minutes to give us a bit more granular detail in your, professional research and all the work you've been doing over many years. How does that happen? How does behavioural change happen? What kind of things need to take place? What kind of advice would you give to policymakers in the city around that?
I think the first thing to say is that behaviour change is really difficult to achieve. A lot of what sort of goes under the name of behaviour change is often more generational change. It's younger generations doing different things than the cohorts above them. So getting people to change behaviour is really, really difficult. But there are things you can do. I think in many ways it starts with making people aware of alternatives that exist. But you need to do that in a very intensive way. There is something that we call personalized travel planning, which is a very good way where someone really comes and talks to you and talks you through your daily routines and how you might do things differently. And it doesn't stay with that one interaction, but it is something that happens over a period of time. And if you do that, and if you couple that to, for instance, reduced fares on buses for a limited amount of time so that people can try out and can experience how it is to travel in that way and actually find out that the buses aren't as bad as they've always thought, then you can actually create durable change. And there are cities in the UK who've been very, very successful in this. I'm thinking of Brighton, which really has a very good reputation in this. But this is a very intensive way of doing things. And it's also very difficult to fund because the things that national government wants to fund is what is known as capital spend. It's basically infrastructure, it's hardware, technology. They don't want to spend money on staff and people who do this because you need trained staff who do this and who really can meaningfully communicate with people about these issues. So it's really a set of skills that you need. And so it's about human capital, and that costs money, and that's very, very difficult at the moment. So that's one of the things you can do. You can also work with groups and start with young people, with children, in schools. That is where a lot of behavior change can be achieved. And through the children, you can also get to the parents, because it is often when the children are going to ask questions from their parents about why they do things in a particular way, that you do see things opening up, a window of change happening. Another thing you can do is get to people at moments where the broader conditions in their life are changing. So that sounds very abstract, but a good example of that is when people are moving house and they have to establish new routines, new habits. This is a period that people are much more receptive to change. Or when they change jobs, or when their children go to school, or when they are about to give up their driving license because they're at a certain age. These are moments where you can meaningfully engage with people and where sort of this window of behavior change opens up. And once you've done that, you will see that through social networks, these effects can propagate. And those are the kinds of things that you have to do. So it's not only about giving people financial incentives or offering new services. It's a combination of all these things and that personal approach to really get meaningful behavior change enacted.
Thank you. Talking about behaviour change, Louise, I'm going to come to you with this question. Can you do something? Let's have a look where the rest of the question's gone. Hold on. Can you do something about illegal parking on pavements, verges, cycle lanes at all? what can be done? This question isn't about you personally, obviously. We're talking about the City Council and the County Council. So do you have any responses on that? And Andrew as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably one for the County Council, who are the parking enforcement authority. Sorry.
Nicely handled, Louise. Very smooth.
I wish, is the short answer. Yeah, look, I mean, you know, one of the things that really bugs me personally, I have to say, is dangerous and discourteous parking. You know, I mean, I live in Summertown. Plenty of you will know what I'm talking about around South Parade, you know, on the W lines around the corners, in the disabled bay. I mean, you know, how selfish can you be? You know, pavement parking, unfortunately, is not in itself illegal. I believe the government is thinking about extending powers to make it illegal outside London, where it is, to other places. So I hope they do that, and if they do, that we will get those powers and use them and enforce them, because, well, I don't need to tell you why. You know, I'm sure all the councillors here do, you know, regular messages in the mailbox from wheelchair users, those with buggies, less mobile people, who won't go out, won't go down to the shops because they can't get past on the pavements. And you know, there is a basic philosophical point about businesses and district centres, which frankly we need to address. And it is basically, the question is this: does a business flourish better if all of its customers can arrive at its front door in their own car, or does it flourish better if the environment outside the business is actually a nicer place to be because they can't arrive by their car, you know? And there are people who have strong views on either side of that, and I think I know which side I am.
So, Andrew, please don't sit down just yet, because I've got another question for you. Why does the County Council still have a car park at the front and back of County Hall, little more than 100 metres away from its zero emission zone? So we're talking about behaviour change, so I think it's a very important question that requires a very transparent answer. So over to you, Andrew.
Well, I mean, I'm not personally responsible for the plant of the building, you know, but, you know, I mean, what can I say? I don't use it myself, but then I'm lucky enough to live within a distance which makes it unnecessary to do that. Look, you know, one of the things I criticised about the initial zone of the ZEZ when the former administration of the County Council was rolling it out was that they'd conveniently left out their own car park. And I'm pleased that the bigger area will include it. I mean, yeah, it's a fair question. As I say, it's not my choice, you know, I can't say that. I don't use it myself. I do have colleagues who do. There are councillors who have health challenges, which makes it difficult for them to come in from, you know, further flung places in the county on public transport. You know, should we enable them to attend and do their duty? Yes, we should, you know. So there is a balance to be struck there.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that question isn't directed at you, it's directed at the County Council. But I think given the response in this room, it would be great if you could take that question to the County Council and get a response for us, please. Thank you for your response as well. Okay, so next, Luke, we've got a question for you. This is obviously a very live issue. This is the issue of bus gates. So what do you think to the relative merits of a bus gate that cars cannot pass at all compared to one where they can pay and pass?
Thanks, Shasta. That's a good question. I mean, from my perspective, I'm pretty agnostic to exactly what the solution is. You know, all I want to see is the productivity of buses improved, so we can speed up bus journey times, make buses more attractive, and deliver a better service to people who use our buses. And we can't just have a situation where bus journey times just keep getting slower. So the County Council is the Highways Authority. You know, I've deliberately said with everything we've said about Zebra and all the targets we've tried to give about 10% journey time improvements, we've left it very agnostic as to how that is delivered, because we're not experts in that. You know, the County Council and you know, the City Council and all the people that work, you know, that work for them you know, do a lot more engagement with the public than we're able to do with the resources we've got. They are much better at balancing the needs of all the different groups than we are, and we're kind of up for both methods, really. We're not saying that we want to see bus gates where no other vehicles can go through. Absolutely, we understand that there's going to be vehicles that are going to need to go through. There's carers, there's people with health problems, there's people maybe who are making certain types of deliveries that are going to need to go through those gates. And we don't need to see all traffic removed from the city. What we want to see is improvement of 10% in bus speeds, and that only really needs maybe 25% of cars to be removed, in general. We saw that during the COVID times when we were in lockdown situations. We saw the traffic levels drop massively in the first lockdown, but again in the second and third lockdown. And we saw the impact that was achievable on the bus running times. It was significant. So we're not saying all cars must never pass through a bus gate. That's a matter for the county council. What we're saying is bus productivity must improve by 10%. If it doesn't, then unlocking things like the investment we've got to make in Zebra and all those improvements we want to make to the services are not possible. And if they're not possible, it's really hard for us to improve the services to a level where we're going to get that behavioural change.
Thank you. And given this is such a live issue, Andrew and Louise, I was just wondering if you had anything you want to add to that question at all?
Just one nuance in the question there, which was pay and pass. So I don't think we would be looking at letting people just be able to pay and go through. It has to be fair. So if we're going to let people go through, it's going to be on a basis of need or of residency in the city or something. It's not going to be based on the ability to pay to do it.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a number of questions here around cycling. So what I'm going to do is group them together. There's also a very important question here about gender. Now, as we know, very horrifically, more people have died cycling on the roads of our city. We've had a number of fatalities, and disproportionately they have also been women. So I think it's important to emphasise that point here. So the questions around cycling are, how can we make cargo bikes, and especially electric cargo bikes, truly affordable for poorer people in the city, truly affordable, not car owner affordable? Will the council be introducing a bike hire scheme? The e-scooter scheme is good, but not exactly, inverted commas, active travel. There's also questions around the safety of cyclists. And I'm just going to specifically find this question, which is focusing on gender. So if you just give me a second. Here it is. There are gendered patterns of transportation, e.g. more likely to trip chain. I don't understand what that is, so forgive me, whoever posed the question. So, e.g., more likely to trip chain, have additional security concerns. How are you specifically engaging with women to address these issues? Now, I'm going to state a very obvious thing. There's only one woman on the panel, so it's not just for the woman on the panel to respond to that question. I would like all the panellists to respond. So, specifically, we're talking about issues around the gendered pattern of transportation, safety of women cyclists, given the disproportionate number of women cyclists who have died. And also, we're looking at the issues of making cycling truly affordable and accessible in our city. So I'll leave the panel to decide which order they want to speak in.
I'll make a start. Also, quickly, just to address the point about scooters. So I remember having a presentation from one of the scooter companies that had started in the States somewhere. And they made the point that actually being on a scooter is quite a lot more active than sitting behind the wheel of a car. So you're engaging your core body strength. So point A and B, they said there was something of a gateway drug into cycling. Quite a lot of people start on the scooter because they think it's easier than driving, but then move on to the car. Onto the bike. In Oxford, I think the gender stats for numbers of cyclists are actually much closer than they are nationally. It's almost 50-50. A lot of women cycle in Oxford, and that's partly through weight of numbers. You know, there are a lot of us here, and so it seems more normal, and it's, I think the drivers, I'm sure every cyclist here has got a horror story about drivers, but actually drivers in Oxford are pretty considerate of cyclists compared to many other places I've cycled. I think, for me, it's something of a statistical blip that the 5 people who've died in Oxford cycling recently were all women. I mean, nationally, more men die cycling than women do. But coming on to sort of making it attractive to women and affordable to women who may be more likely to need to have a cargo bike to take children and shopping around with them, that is a big issue. I was talking to the cabinet member for health at the what are you, Mark? Public Health and Equalities earlier today about electric bike hire schemes. Because those are, as Councillor Kerr over there has already found, those are real enablers for people. There are companies that do electric bike leasing, for example, that I'm looking at as well, because those can be like people sometimes lease cars, but you can lease an electric bike for much less, sorry, close your ears, Luke, much less than a monthly bus pass.
It's all complimentary, Louise.
It's all complimentary. So there are innovative ways that we can look at enabling people to get onto electric bikes, which I have one, I've got an Audi bike and an e-bike. It's absolutely transformational if you've got to go that bit further, or if the weather's awful. If you've got an electric bike, people are going to do it. And Shasha, you and I have been talking quite a bit lately. We're going to get you down to the Wheels for All site and try one of these out. So I think we've got to do more of that, engaging them. There's some great groups in the city like Joyriders, who engage with women who've never cycled before and sort of buddy up with them and help them find ways to cycle to work, things like that. So it's one of the types of measure I think that Tim was referring to, that it can be quite labour intensive, a lot of sort of one-to-one stuff. But we have got to do that. We've got to do that alongside putting in traffic filters. It's something maybe the workplace parking levy can help fund.
Okay,
right,
so as we move along the panel, there's another question which I'm going to throw into the mix of questions focused on cycling. What are the plans for expanding cycle parking at the station so that commuters and visitors into the city can pick up a bike or store one at the station for use in the city? So if you just add that on to the other questions around cycling and continue answering, so I've grouped them together. Thank you.
Do you want to... I mean, the station master plan thing that I've been to and several other councils have, everyone we go to, we bang on about the fact that they need to have masses more secure cycle parking there, because every time we go now, it's full. Tim, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there's a whole set of questions around cycling. And I want to come back to something we talked about before, because this, I think, is where participation is actually really important, to actually not only talk to women about cycling in different groups and not talk about women in general, but think about different ethnicities, think about different ages, think about different sort of levels of bodily fitness. All these kinds of things need to be taken on board, but also involve them in the actual planning and design process. And there are many techniques that you can use for these kinds of things. And again, there is a lot of expertise here in the universities, but you can also learn from other cities what they've done. So I think that is really important, and that is really key, because I think it's about making voices heard that are currently not being heard. In addition to that, something is really important, and that's about sort of the safety of the cycling infrastructure. And that is where segregated cycling infrastructure has an important role to play. That is never going to be enough to get people onto bikes, but it is part of a broader mix. And I think we're not doing enough of that in Oxford. And I understand this is very difficult when you have a sort of historic street pattern that is sort of in many parts from before the introduction of the private car on the scale that we now use it. But there's also a choice that you can make. You can reallocate more road space away from cars. That's a very uncomfortable discussion to be had, but that's a political discussion that the city at some point will have to face. And there are no easy answers there, but I think this is a really important thing. And there are many cities you can learn from. In the UK, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, these sort of cities there have gone through all these processes. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are many things you can learn by looking elsewhere.
Thank you. Luke, I was wondering if, as a representative of the main bus company in our city, if you've got any responses to the questions around cycling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think our view is really that cycling is complementary to what we do. There are many people that I speak to who are part of cycling groups who are also big bus users. And being able to have a good bus service and a really good cycling infrastructure is something that helps us, because it means people are not going to be car dependent, they're not going to be car owners, and they're not always going to choose car as the first choice when they walk out the house. So that's really good. We've been doing a lot of work on the concept of a mobility hub. So to pick the point up on that was mentioned about the station and being somewhere that we need more secure cycle parking and electric bike hire and bike hire. We think that's something that the city does need. You know, there's never going to be a bus for every given trip that you might want to make. Sometimes a bus isn't going to be the best option, and we're totally okay with that. You know, what we want to see is at certain interchanges or certain busy bus stops, we can see that if there were better facilities with more cycle storage, better waiting facilities, maybe connectivity, maybe you know, delivery lockers and things like that, we could make, you know, more of your journey interchange and make that a more productive thing to do, or an easier thing to do. Then that can benefit the whole system. So yeah, for us, we're not saying it's bus or cycling. Absolutely not. You know, they complement each other fully, and some sort of bike hire scheme, such as what's been discussed, is definitely something we think would be a good thing.
Thank you, Andrew. Do you want to add anything?
Well, there have been lots of comments there about cycling, you know, and it's great to have two of the cycling champions from across the county with us here tonight, Louise and Dan. Look, lots of questions there, so just pick up two. Yeah, Tim, segregated provision is always better. Absolutely. It's in LTCP, okay? That's a change. That is now a new commitment as part of the hierarchy in county travel policy. You know, that is what we intend to do and to deliver. Just to pick up Luke's point, he's made it more than once. This is not about delivering one choice. You know, it's absolutely key to give people options, good options, you know. So, you know, we all do it. We use a bus, we use a bike, you use a car, you know. Let's not pretend we don't walk. Absolutely. Yes, sure. Monitoring data about people in the city centre, by far the most popular way of people getting into the city centre is on foot, you know. So is it as nice as it could be? No way. So let's improve that as well. So, yeah, I think that's probably what I've got to add on that particular one.
Thank you. I'm really aware that it's very, very hot in this room. It's quite unbearable, actually. So there's a couple more questions we're going to get through, and then I think it'd be good to wrap up. We will go as close to 9 o'clock as possible, but it is really, really warm in here. I don't know if it's possible to open any doors, but thank you. Okay, so we've got a few more questions which I'm grouping together. So one is, why is there so little data to support the interventions you're making? It all seems a bit suck it and see. I purposefully am coming to this question because I think one of the challenges, many challenges as we're all aware, we were hearing about them this evening, but one of them is this issue around transparency and public trust and building trust. And I think this question is really important. Another question which links into this is around 10% of Oxfordshire pensioners don't use computers. How can we find any information? Most county city materials don't even list contact numbers. We've already heard a lot this evening about consultation. We've heard the panel graciously accepting that some of the consultation could have been done a lot better, and lessons have been learned from that in terms of moving things forward. So these are very vital questions. So access to information, who gets to access information, who is left out from accessing information, not purposefully, I'd like to add. And then this issue around access to data. So we are told there's a lot of evidence, a lot of data. So if we could start with you, Andrew, and then move to Tim, and then come to you, Louise and Luke, on that one.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, you know, where we came in was talking about what we're referring to as the core schemes, you know, and I began with a big caveat. You know, they will be out for consultation. You know, these are very ambitious schemes. It is a combination of modelling, and there will be supporting data when the consultation goes out, and also evidence from other places, as you know, Tim and his colleagues have looked at. So, you know, have a look at LTCP, have a look at the appendices that go behind that, you know, have a look at the recent papers from the County Council just yesterday, seems longer ago than that, you know, about the type of information gathering that goes into these policies. But it is clearly a challenge, and it is clearly an important one. On the question of engagement and how you reach those who are not digitally engaged, yeah, it's hard, you know, and it is a major challenge. And one, again, as I've already acknowledged, you know, public authorities spend a lot of time working out how to engage with people and how to engage with everybody, and in particular how to reach the people that are not easy to reach. On the question of phone numbers, you know, again, it is a challenge. A council is a massive organisation and deals with an absolute tsunami of inquiries every single day, you know, and it is hard to develop systems that deal with them efficiently. And all I'd say about that is that the county council officers in my portfolio area are just brilliant. You know, they work so hard. Highways management, you know, doesn't sound very glamorous, but it involves teams doing 40,000 interventions on our roads. That's fixing potholes and bridges and culverts and things every year, you know, and I've been down to the depot to look at how they do that. That is a massive operation, and they do it amazingly with nothing like enough money or resource.
So the question about data is a very important one, and there is a lot of data, but not always the data that we need for the kind of for understanding what these schemes will generate in terms of effects. Because what the data that you typically get is about what people actually do at a given moment in time. So that is what we call their observed behavior, their actual behavior. And it's very difficult to then, you have to make a lot of assumptions to then kind of use that data to say anything meaningful about how their behavior will change once you put in place some kind of intervention. That's where the models come in that Andrew was talking about. Now, some of these models have certain assumptions built into them, and they're very good at reproducing what we call the behavior of the average person in the city. They work much less good once you start to drill down in particular groups and particular communities. That's where the challenge lies. There are two things you can do. One is make increasing use of smartphone data, and we see more and more being used of that, but there are all kinds of privacy issues, as you can imagine. The other is to do transport planning and the evidence that support is in different ways and make use of different methods. Use qualitative methods, put together. If you do focus groups well, and if you put them together carefully, you can get a lot of information out of them. You can do smart games with people. There are all sorts of things that you can do to get a better understanding of what the behavior change is going to be. That costs money, is not easy, but it can be done.
Thank you.
Thanks. So very briefly, yes, on data, the County Council has employed a consultant modeller, and we are absolutely insisting on seeing the modelling of the different possible options that are going to go into the consultation document. So that data will be in there. Then, but about engaging people who are not digitally literate, for want of a better word. Yeah. So this afternoon, I attended the Inclusive Transport Forum, which is something the City Council set up when we were first putting in all the measures in the city centre, with pavement cafes and things, to engage with all these groups, lots of groups who don't normally get engaged with and who could have been negatively impacted. So we have lots of different disability groups, but we also have the over 50s network represented there. So the meeting this afternoon had was on exactly this subject, the core transport systems. So they were presented to everybody at that forum for their feedback, their input, their suggestions for tweaks, their I heard from one disabled woman who uses taxis a lot, and if she needs to come into the city centre, into the zero emission zone, the taxi driver adds an extra £2 onto her fare because he's having to pay that to go in. That's a huge problem. We'd kind of thought that, well, it's just a daily charge, so that would be split between lots of different customers. But while it's still very small, if it's only one, they're probably only making one trip into it. So, that there is a big impact on the disabled users. So just to say, we really are trying to engage with lots of people who wouldn't engage with the computer And in particular, the over 50s network, I don't know if anybody here is engaged with that or a member of that, but they are very articulate and very engaged. So I'm hoping that that's going to be a really useful set of input to these schemes. Right, Luke.
Thanks, Louise. No, I was just going to pick a bit up on what Tim said about data. Modelling is what we have, as Tim said, and modelling really depends on exactly what it is you're saying you're going to do. And obviously these schemes at the moment are still in the development phase. There's a lot of things to think about in terms of what bus improvements are made at the same time as the schemes, which schemes happen when, what order do they happen in, and therefore overlaying the effects of all of those different things on the model actually does become really complex. And you have to make quite detailed assumptions about what people's behaviour is going to be. And we've got a role to play in that. We've provided a lot of data to the county, and we're working really closely with the consultants that they've got who are doing the modelling. We've also got our own piece of work that we did with a company called City Swift. During the pandemic, we did a piece of work where they looked at all of our bus speeds, how they changed when we had the free flow conditions, what that would mean if we had a normal level of passenger boardings, but with those same road conditions, and how fast buses might be able to be. And we've shared that data with the council. And actually we're going to be using City Swift going forward once the schemes ever get implemented to track, well, are we actually achieving a 10% improvement in bus speeds? If we are, then that's great. If we're not, then where aren't we? And what do we need to do about it? Because obviously we want to see the improvements distributed across the city and not just focused on one or two corridors where maybe we see a big improvement in other areas where we don't see any improvement. So there is a lot there that we're doing, and also talking with the council about what interventions might be possible in order to model the effect of those interventions on the model. So if a new bus service is put in, exactly where will it go, what frequency will it operate at, and therefore they can put that data into the model and see what it means in terms of trip journey times from different places within the city, and how that makes things more accessible. So a lot of work from our side going into that as well to try and make that modelling better. Thanks,
Luke. And thanks to the panel. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to wrap up with the questions, and I'm going to ask the panel to answer as many of these questions as possible. So the most popular question this evening is the following. Paris is opening an aerial car cable route in 2025. It reduces congestion and is emission-free, great for tourists and commuters. What is the council doing to investigate their potential for Oxford? We've got a number of questions around planning. How can planning laws be used to reduce traffic and congestion? I'm paraphrasing some of these questions. There's also a question around planning permission around houses that are built, and how can we better ensure that there are adequate and proper pavements, cycleways around those new housing developments. There's a series of questions around railways, essential, as we all know, specifically the questions around the Cowley branch line. Where are we with the Cowley branch line? And, if the panel could update us on that. And obviously these questions are critical because, as the panel has already said, we have to tackle all of these things at the same time, simultaneously, and we are running out of time, not just this evening on this panel, but generally. So if I could ask the panel to go in any order you would like to organise yourselves in and respond to those questions. Thank you.
So, cable cars. I didn't know former Councillor Dick Wolf was in this evening. I'll let you into a secret. I think they're a great idea. But, who knows? It's obviously a bit out there. But, let's keep talking. Let's keep talking. We talk about options. I'll just float something past you. I can't help thinking that for the JR Hospital, some sort of off-site parking facility served by some sort of regular shuttle, to stop cars that don't have to get right up to the front door, and plenty do, let's face it, in a hospital, but those that don't, park somewhere else, wouldn't that be the ideal way of getting from your car park up the hill to the hospital? I don't know if that's a runner or not, but I'm just floating that one. The local council is looking sceptical there. Planning, yeah, absolutely key, absolutely key. When local planning authorities give planning permission for residential developments, for employment sites, and particularly for large sites, they have an absolute responsibility to make sure that those sites, bake in how the people who are going to live and work there get around. And that has failed too often in recent times in our city. We have delivered sites that are a failure in terms of delivering active travel. There is a huge one coming out of the ground now in my division, Oxford North. The people who live there are expected to get out of that site by going around the Wolvercote roundabout. It can take you 10 minutes to get around that Wolvercote roundabout. If you live there and your children go to the local primary school, are you going to walk them round those traffic lights? I don't think so. That is a failure, and there have been others, and it is absolutely key the planning authorities do better.
I don't know much about that.
I have been to a briefing on the Cowley Branch line. I think that is certainly a possibility. Business cases are being worked up for it, and it would be a great solution, wouldn't it? Absolutely great. Coming around that Eastern Arc, bringing people into the centre, round through Blackbird Leys, Littlemore, that would be a wonderful thing. So I think there's very, very active conversations about that going on. Other questions?
Questions around planning and the cable car, Louise.
Oh,
Yes, I want to say something about the Cowley Branch and the cable car, because both are doing things the wrong way round. And with that I mean that you start with a piece of infrastructure and then want to put it into the existing system. It makes much more sense to start from what people need, where the mobility needs are. And then you will see that both these issues will do very little for people in Oxford. The Cowley Branch will make it easier to go by rail from East Oxford to London, for instance. So what it will do, it will increase housing prices in East Oxford. It will sort of spur a new round of gentrification in that area. It won't solve any of the problems in Oxford. The same is with the cable car. It will cater to a very small part of the demand for mobility that exists within the city. I think there's a real question here about value for money, and I think with that money there are many other things you can do that will help Oxford much more than that. I also want to respond to the question that is up there, which was directed to me about needing a car. I think often when we say that we need a car, we're talking more about what we desire than what we really need. But this is also where this personalized travel planning approach really comes into play, because then you can talk through with people how they do their mobility and what the other options are. And if you do it that way, you will see that many of the needs are wants or desires, not really needs. That is not to say that there is not a need for car travel. There are needs. If you sort of think about people with disability, there are many older people in the city. If we're talking about having a family with children, there are various trips that you really need a car for, and we should cater to those. But that is giving the car a subservient role in the wider transport system. It's there to fill the gaps that the other systems cannot cater to. And I think that is a much more generative, a much more positive approach, much more productive approach going forward, rather than talking about for or against cars. It's about thinking about what a meaningful role of the car is in what we call a multimodal system, where it's about buses, walking, cycling, cars, e-scooters, and so on.
Thank you. So I think that's an excellent point to end on. So messages, we need positive, productive, meaningful, nuanced change, and we need some radical change as well. No one can deny that. I'd like to thank the panel, Andrew, Luke, Louise and Tim. I'd also like to thank the audience for being here and those online. It's very hot in here, so thank you for persevering. I'd like to thank the organisers and the volunteers, and I will hand over to Jamie, who is, or Robin, one of you, who are going to update us on what happens as a follow-up to this event, and just say thank you very much.
Just before I hand over to Robin, I just want to say I hope you felt that the questioning system worked quite well. I know it feels quite strange not to be able to put it up your hand. I don't. Somebody there didn't like it, okay. But you can see though we had an awful lot of questions and we got through about a quarter of them. But I think what we will try to do, I'm sort of slightly making this on the hoof, but I think what we'll do is try and look at those, and if the panel's willing, sort of try and answer some of the key ones, and maybe put something up about that on the CoHSAT website. Well, I can appreciate that's your concern, but I mean, you have had the opportunity to ask questions, and if your question didn't get answered, please email us, and we'll look to get the response from the panel on anything you feel crucial that hasn't been answered. But now we'll try and do that, but I'd like to pass over to Robin to close.
So I'd like to say this is very much the start of the process. In fact, in many ways, it's before the start of the process, and not even the process, because we're trying to add to the Council's process. So thank you very much for coming and asking your questions and participating in the event. And it's a very important topic, as demonstrated by all of you here today, and I don't know how many people we've got watching online as well. And we as CoHSAT are very keen to keep assisting the discussion in as inclusive way as we can. And as part of that, we are keen to kind of spread this kind of thing into wider communities, and so if you have a community group wherever in the city or the wider county and would like some version of this event, please get in touch with us, info@cohsat.org.uk. You can just Google CoHSAT and you'll be able to find a contact box at CoHSAT, and we will try and arrange something for you. But that's the end of the evening. Have a very good and safe journey home, whatever mode of transport you have chosen. Thank you very much.